The Nightlands. The Nightlands are the world of eternal twilight from which the Night Lords, and some say the Nightbanes, come from. In some ways it is much like our own Earth, but in many others it is so alien as to defy explanation. Where did this world come from? Who are its inhabitants? And why do they pose such a threat to the Earth of the 21st century? These are questions that humans and Nightbane alike struggle to answer. Ancient tales. Prehistoric shamans may have known and visited the Nightlands in ancient times, and their accounts may have survived in the form of legends about some mythical lands as Hades and Tartarus in Greece, Hell in Norse mythology, or Xibalba and Mictlan in Aztec mythology, all of which were said to be covered in darkness and the homes of unearthly monsters and creatures. However, most of the knowledge regarding the fabled Nightlands has been kept secret for thousands of years, either lost in time or handed down from generation to generation by small groups that have never shared these secrets. The sources. Among the writings that deal directly with the Nightlands are a collection of ancient scrolls that were written sometime in the year 1000 BC. However, they are said to be copies of an even older document produced 10,000 plus years ago, when writings supposedly did not exist. The scrolls are collectively known as the Writings of the Dark. Only a few Nightbanes know the original language those scrolls were written in, among them the mysterious Wanderer. One of the originals is a 3,000-year-old parchment scroll with dozens of stories about the Nightlands and the Baal. It is believed to be a copy of an original document that dates back to the ancient war that overthrew the Night Lords, and it is written in a Proto-Semitic language that only an expert biblical scholar could attempt to translate, and even then he might not succeed. This document is in the hands of the organization known as the Underground Railroad, whose agents stole it from the private collection of a British archaeologist. Another set of the same writings exist on clay tablets, produced in Sumeria thousands of years ago. Some of the tablets are missing, and the writings are in the same strange language, but a few passages have been translated into Sumerian, which scholars can translate. The tablets are in the vaults of a university on the U.S. East Coast, a center of studies known for its arcane research. Only 2 translated works dealing with the Nightlands are known to exist. The first is a set of 2 books titled The Books of Night. They are illuminated manuscripts produced in 812 AD at a French monastery. The Books of Night were reprinted during the 1600s by an English publisher who produced some 200 copies. Most of them were burned as heretical and demonic, and only a handful are believed to have survived. A few are known to have fallen into the hands of members of the Searchers and the Nocturnes, and a couple of sorceress orders. In 1989, a small occult publishing company known as Midnight Press published a trade paperback of the 17th century book, although in a very abridged form. The 2 original volumes had been over 3,000 pages long, while the paperback version included only a few fragments totaling some 250 pages. About 10,000 copies of this book were printed. The book was not enthusiastically received even by the New Age and mystic community, due to its very dark and ominous tone. The New Agers wanted something more positive, not tales about demonic monsters who wish to eradicate humankind. Half of the press run was recycled when sales proved to be disappointing. The other 5,000 or so can still be found in occult bookstores or the occasional library. Note, the Books of Night are rumored to be a partial translation of the original Chronicles of Shadows, which are said to have been first translated into Latin by a Nightbane scholar long before the French or English versions. The other translated work is known as the Chronicle of Shadows, copied sometime in the 10th century from the accounts of an Egyptian sorcerer who wrote down his travels into the Nightlands sometime around 40 BC. The original papyrus scrolls were copied by a Roman scribe on parchment, and then it was translated into Latin and copied by an Irish monastery in 940 AD. This account has a lot of important information about the dangers of the Nightlands, and a detailed description of the Nightlands' counterparts to Rome and Alexandria, two of the largest cities in the ancient world. The Chronicle of Shadows was only available in about half a dozen illuminated manuscripts. In 1998, however, an up-and-coming internet-based company acquired the electronic rights to a number of medieval manuscripts, including the Chronicle of Shadows, and an electronic reproduction is on a web page, floating freely through the information superhighway. So far, only a handful of people who understand its significance have accessed it. The Nightlands before the Baal. Even the most ancient sources disagree and appear not to have clear knowledge about what the Nightlands were like before the arrival of the Baal. Some think that the dimension was not always a place of darkness and shadows. A few passages of the writings of the Dark suggest that the Nightlands were a place of colors and light, where shapes and dimensions were all relative and could be changed at will. Others claim that those passages do not refer to the Nightlands at all, but to the dream stream. Wild speculation about what the Nightlands were like abound. Some think that it was a place of pure light, dominated by beings very similar to the Guardians. Others claim this world has always been shrouded in darkness, but the formless ones who lived in it were not evil, and the land was not plagued by monsters and strange creatures. The only thing that all the writings agree upon is that the formless ones were the native inhabitants of that dimension. Some writings also mention that thousands of years before the coming of the Night Lords, a mighty civilization of humanoids rose and fell in the Nightlands. Very little is known about these beings, and some wonder if they existed at all. The only proof of their existence is the presence of some strange ruins that have no apparent connection to the Night Lords, and the existence of powerful magical items known as artifacts, said to be the creations of this legendary lost race. The only piece of writing that makes any attempt to describe the ancient lost race is found in the Books of Night, in a fragment that does not appear in the most recent translations of these tomes. The fragment is a roughly translated song or chant. The rhythm of the chant was utterly lost in the translation, and no copies of the original survive. It reads, "And mighty was the lost race, the first men to dwell in the lands of the dark. Praised be the ancient ones, friends of dragons and wielders of magic. They be wise and just, seeking not war for its own sake. Noble in bearing and stature, masters of all arts. They bothered not the formless ones, leaving them the greater pan of the land. Alas, their fate was cruel, their doom undeserved. The dark claimed them, young and old, strong and infirm. The lost race fought, wielding mighty artifacts, but their efforts were in vain, for the dark was too strong. One by one they fell, their cities razed, their lore lost. Only towards the end did the formless ones come to their aid, too late to save them. Now the formless ones bear their guilt, for although the dark was vanquished, the lost race was no more." Some students of the Nightlands, mostly Nightbanes and a few parapsychologists, mages, arcanists, and scholars, have written entire books seeking to interpret the significance of this passage. All kinds of wild theories have been bandied about. The lost race has been identified with the Atlanteans of legend, elves of Nordic mythology, and a dozen pantheons from ancient religions. So far, no proof of any of those allegations have been found. In fact, many scholars believe the lost race is nothing but a myth. This belief is strongest among the school of thought that believes the Nightlands are nothing but a reflection of humankind's collective subconscious. See the Origin and Cosmology section. However, frequent travelers from the frequent travelers into the Nightlands have seen a number of ruins that are totally different from the Baal's dark and massive construction style, and nothing can explain the origin of the powerful magical artifacts that are occasionally found on Earth, the Nightlands, and the astral plane. The most likely explanation is that these structures and items were created by some civilization that predated the Night Lords. Whether fact or fiction, it is written that some tragedy struck the lost race down before the coming of the Night Lords. The enemy mentioned in the passage, the mysterious Dark, has also inspired countless ideas and debates. Maybe the Dark is the true master of the Night Lords. This theory is very close to the truth, although not in the way most theorists believe. See the true power behind the Night Lords for more information. Others think the Dark refers to the Night Lords themselves, and that it was the Baal who destroyed the ancients, although this is directly contradicted by the writings of the Dark. Only the few beings long-lived enough to have seen these strange events with their own eyes could confirm or dispel these tales, and if any such creatures exist, it is not seen fit to do so. The coming of the Baal. On they came, defeated yet strong, 53, few but mighty. The formless ones did not strike at them. Shamed by their cowardice, they did not interfere. When the Baal struck, the formless ones were not ready. Unprepared and weak, they fell into slavery, and were no more. That was from the Books of Night. According to the Books of Night, the Baal were the sorcerer kings of the oldest human kingdom that ever existed, believed to have been located somewhere in the Middle East over 12,000 years ago. The title Baal means Lord in their ancient language, and the title would survive into biblical times to mean Lord or God. Eventually, the title was also given, more fittingly, to a demon in Judeo-Christian mythology. These powerful magicians increased their power through human sacrifices and other barbaric practices. Eventually, other kingdoms and men of magic banded together to destroy the Baal. After years of warfare, the Baal were forced to retreat to avoid being obliterated. Using their magic, they opened dimensional portals leading into the Nightlands, where they had a few of their most loyal followers and bodyguards abandon the earth. It appears that the Baal intended to stay in the Nightlands only long enough to regain their strength, but the enemies of the Baal combined their strength to produce an incredibly powerful spell that sealed them in the Nightlands of Night. The spell tapped directly into the Earth's magical field, using the entire planet's mystical energies to erect a near impenetrable barrier between the Earth and the Nightlands. As a result, the power of magic on Earth waned, and would remain diminished and weak for millennia to follow. The Baal had become inhuman creatures. According to the ancient writings, it is said they needed the life energies of other creatures to survive, and that they could manipulate matter and energy without using magic. The writings of the Dark only hint at some possibilities. Perhaps an evil entity of unimaginable power decided to reshape the sorcerer kings into powerful servants, or maybe the transdimensional energies of their passage somehow increased their might. Perhaps the energies or nature of the Nightlands increased their power even more, enabling them to reshape it into the domain we know today. Some passages suggest that the Baal were already at the peak of their power before crossing into the Nightlands, and that they were not transformed further when they crossed over, but had become inhuman long before. In any event, the Baal who arrived in the Nightlands were not limited by human frailties. They were supernatural beings of tremendous power. Whether or not the arrival into the Nightlands had increased their power or made them all the more monstrous remains open to speculation. Despite the barriers that imprisoned the Night Lords, communication between Earth and the Nightlands was possible on a limited scale. The writings of the Dark contain accounts of visions and visitations that give some glimpses as to what happened in the Nightlands after the Baal's arrival. The formless ones who inhabited the land were enslaved, exiled, or destroyed, because within a few centuries after the arrival of the Night Lords, the formless ones disappeared. In their place, the lands were populated by the monstrous servants of the Night Lords, the hounds, hunters, and doppelgangers, among others. Some researchers believe that these minions were formless ones somehow bound into permanent shapes to serve as the slaves and minions of the Night Lords. The process of conquest is said to have taken several decades. The Night Lords were initially few in number, believed to be less than 100. One passage sets their number at 53. Other sources increase the number to as high as 1,000. Somehow they have grown in numbers, either by recruiting more evil sorcerers into their fold, or perhaps through simple procreation. It appears that by the time of the first known Earth civilizations, 5000 BC, the Night Lords' numbers had increased tenfold, and their first city-states had been built. Whatever the Nightlands were like before the coming of the Night Lords by 5000 BC, they had been transformed into the gloomy, desolate, twilight dimension that it is known today. As the first cities rose in places like Sumer and Egypt, the Night Lords were inexplicably drawn to corresponding locations in the Nightlands and erected twisted versions of the Earth communities, as if in mockery of their human counterparts. Their reasons remain largely unknown. The most widely held theory is that the Night Lords somehow feed on the psychic energies of large concentrations of humans, somehow drawing upon the energy that through the veil that divides the dimensions. Another possibility is that doppelgangers can only be created in proximity to psychic energies of human beings. It may also be some strange link that the Night Lords retain with their human ancestors, and which even they do not understand or is beyond their control. Whatever the reason, the process has continued through history. As large human cities rise, certain Night Lords and their minions migrate to corresponding locations in the Nightlands and build their own dark, twisted domains. The current cities are reflections of modern cities with spiraling skyscrapers, but always of dark, gothic, and sinister design. Cornices and ledges are decorated with monstrous gargoyles and grotesque statuary. Often the Nightland version are occupied with a fraction of the people when compared to the human cities. This only contributes to the haunting, empty, and frightening atmosphere that permeates these giant ghost towns of brick, mortar, and steel. It also fuels the legends that the Nightlands are actually dark, evil, mirror reflections of the earth itself.